Climate protesters dragged from a German coal mine. They're calling a deal made with energy giant RWE to demolish a village shameful. But ministers say the village is the wrong symbol for climate warriors. So, is this one step towards stabilizing German energy or a step backwards in the fight against the climate crisis? I'm Jafar Hasnan, and today's newsmaker is the Lützerath protests. Protests in Germany have broken out in Lützerath. Within a few days, there could be little or nothing left of the village as energy producer RWE starts mining the area for coal. Climate activists, including Greta Thunberg, have fought back against police in a bid to halt progress. But given the energy hardships facing Europe, it is unlikely this decision will be reversed. Europe is grappling with one of its biggest energy crises in memory. The war between Russia and Ukraine has led to serious gas shortages, and like most European countries, Germany's leadership has been looking for alternative energy sources to gas. Fueled by the government's green ambitions, Germany set a goal: 80% of the country's energy from wind and solar by 2030. But it seems now that the government is taking steps backward. Last week, electricity generation company RWE released a statement saying they would start to demolish Lützerath in order to mine coal.
All necessary licenses and court orders have been granted, and all original inhabitants left the village some time ago. The appropriation of the village is part of a comprehensive political agreement between the German Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action, the Ministry of Economic Affairs, Industry, Climate Action and Energy of the State of North Rhine-Westphalia, and RWE. The agreement was presented to the public in October 2022, and among other things, is setting out to bring RWE's exit from coal forward by 8 years to 2030.
While RWE appealed for calm and acceptance of the law, environmentalists had other ideas. 20 protesters have ended up in hospital, and 70 police officers have been injured in clashes at the site since Wednesday last week. Let's take a look at what has happened in the German town over the past few days.
Pepper spray, batons and water cannon. Police are clearing demonstrators from the village of Lützerath in western Germany. Thousands of climate activists flocked to the abandoned village to try and put a stop to a planned coal mine expansion. While most went head-to-head with police, several retreated to underground tunnels or occupied farmhouses, making it harder for authorities to remove everyone from the site. But even as the demonstrators confronted police, bulldozers continued to break down the town around them.
Last week, the operations were predominantly characterized by the fact that the protest actions were peaceful and not designed for confrontation. Now, this has been somewhat different. At least the end of an assembly situation. There were violent attacks on colleagues. Stones were thrown from a group, a gathering of people.
Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg joined the environmentalists who say destroying the village to expand the Garsweiler mine would result in huge amounts of greenhouse gas emissions.
How is this possible? In the year 2023, how can we still be continuing down this path that we know leads us nowhere?
But the government is calling it a success story. RWE and the government struck the deal to raise the village in exchange for the company's faster exit from coal, as well as saving other villages originally slated for destruction. Activists say the Green Party, which is now part of a coalition government, has betrayed them.
You are showing clearly today that the changes will not come from the people in power, from governments, from corporations, from the so-called leaders.
The sprawling mine already covers 35 square kilometers and over the years has slowly crept outwards, swallowing towns and villages. It's even enveloped a wind farm. The state president said on German radio that energy politics were not always pretty, but that the coal was needed more than ever in light of the energy crisis confronting Europe's biggest economy.
It is an agreement in support of climate protection, which makes for legal security and which creates the legal binding always demanded by the climate protest movement. From 2030, no more coal will be used to produce electricity in the Rhineland's coal mines.
Police claim the operation to remove activists from the village is nearly complete, but the activists have vowed to fight on.
And joining me now from Kienberg, Germany, is Rio Goldmann. He's the spokesperson of Lützerath Lebt, a climate initiative campaigning to save the village. From Berlin is former German diplomat Volker Stanzel. He's also a senior distinguished fellow at the German Institute for International and Security Affairs. Also in the German capital is journalist and political analyst James Jackson. Thanks all for being with us here today on the Newsmakers. Now, Volker, I find this one thing about Germany's climate policy rather mind-boggling. On the one hand, Germany continues to make pledges to reduce carbon emissions and to protect the climate, but on the other, Germany is expanding a coal mine. So if this is not climate hypocrisy, what else is it?
Well, the problem is actually quite a different one. You can look at it from two perspectives. One is that originally RWE, the mining company, also an electricity provider, agreed with the government previously, it's a long time ago, to keep mining until 2038. And the compromise reached last year in October meant it would stop in 2030 already, but it could continue mining in the village of Lützerath. Now, against what backdrop did this happen? It's the war in Ukraine. It is not so much a question of continuing our climate policy. It's much more a question of making sure that our sanctions imposed against Russia work effectively, which is foregoing the use of gas and oil from Russia. And that means we need other energy sources. And unfortunately, Germany has not many resources of its own, except for lignite, which is the worst, the most polluting of them all. So for a time being, there is no other way but for the sake of the sanctions, keeping the sanctions intact, to continue mining in Lützerath.
Okay, so you say that this is about urgency, but Volker, according to experts, it will take 2 years to develop the lignite reserves that sit underneath Lützerath, which is perhaps too late to provide any immediate relief from the Russian squeeze.
Seems you're very optimistic about the war in Ukraine.
No, but I think these are the facts. In fact, there is another study, so let me quote that one for you here, which basically says that Germany may not even need the extra coal. There was a report published in August by the international research platform Coal Transition that found that even if coal plants operate at very, very high capacity until the end of this decade, they already have more coal available than needed from existing supplies.
Yes,
so what's the urgency about? That's what I'm trying to understand.
All kind of experts' opinions going either way, but the government was last year in a very difficult position, and it decided, not knowing how long the war would continue, to at least make sure that lignite, at least 2 years from 2022 on counting, would be available. I mean, a war like that creates a desperate situation. And maybe you have followed the news about the discussion about whether we could afford to terminate buying gas and oil from Russia. An extremely volatile discussion. And to have at least one resource of our own, even if it takes maybe 2 years until it really works, is some sort of reassurance.
Indeed, and certainly there's no doubt that just Russia is a major gas exporter to Germany. In fact, Germany...
It has been.
It has been, more than 50% up until the war began. Yes. Rio, so Volker says this is about protecting Germany's energy, and the German government basically did not have any other options besides doing what it is doing right now. Do you buy that?
No, absolutely I don't buy it. And actually, I think it's a big scandal that German government uses the war in Ukraine that costs many lives to expand coal that dramatizes the climate crisis that will cost even more lives. And we had these studies of the coal research group that shows that we don't have to burn this coal. And then the government uses like different studies to said that we need the coal, but the studies that say that we need the coal are based on the data of RWE. So like they're using the data of the company that of course want to burn the coal to continue to make profits with it to justify this expansion of coal mining. And actually there was even like a detailed plan that scientists of the German Institute for Economics like gave to the government that said, okay, we can do it like this, provide our energy and make sure that the lights don't go out, and at the same time don't expand the coal mine. And the government right now tries to use the war in Ukraine to justify this massive climate this coal mining that will cost so many more lives, but like the only one who profits from it is actually RWE, because of course they invested in this and they speculated with like burning the coal under the village, so they needed to expand and they need it for their profits. But at the same time, millions of people will die from it. Actually, millions of people have already lost their homes due to the climate crisis, and that the government that has the role to protect the people uses some false information to justify this scandal when it comes to climate policy is I don't know what to say about that.
Okay, Volker, I mean, I just want to pick up on one point that you made earlier, that undoubtedly the war in Ukraine has triggered a massive energy crisis across the world. But don't you think at this point, instead of rushing for the dirtiest fossil fuel in the world, coal, this war in Ukraine serves as an opportunity for Germany and many other countries across the world to accelerate the shift to renewable energy?
Well, you see that the new government, the green, red, yellow coalition, a three-party coalition, could have comfortably remained with the compromise reached early on, which I mentioned, which would have allowed RWE to continue mining on a minor scale, but still until 2038. And in the end, the result of pollution would not have been so different from what we are heading for now. I understand that this compromise, which was reached in October last year, which changed the parameters, is very hard to bear if your priority is continuing introducing new energies and to terminating traditional energies, especially in the case of as dirty an energy resource as lignite is. But it is indeed a question of priorities. And we had a volatile discussion in Germany, not only about Lützerath, but about nuclear power stations as well. And of course, about the question of delivering arms to Ukraine or not. In a war situation, which is for Germany the first time since the end of the Second World War, and that was a different kind of Germany, a war situation is a different one.
Okay. Volker, before I move forward, just a yes or no question. So as I understand, the priority at this point in Germany is the war in Ukraine, not the climate crisis, correct?
Exactly.
All right. James, what do you think about this?
So I think it's easy to forget that, of course, Ukraine's struggle for freedom against Russia is very important, and it's played a really crucial part in the debate in the last year. But Germany still has commitments. When Germany signed the Paris Climate Agreement, it was actually a unanimous vote for that. So that means that Germany has to stay within the emissions range of 1.5 degrees. And it's going to be very hard to do that while burning lignite coal, which Volker has pointed out is extremely dirty. And I'm also grateful for Volker for pointing out that it's not just about shutting down coal, it's also about shutting down nuclear. And I think that's where the big mistake from the German Green movement, as well as Chancellor Merkel, who decided to backtrack on her decision to keep nuclear going. Now, I don't think we'd be sitting here and talking about Lützerath if we were going to be continuing with nuclear energy. So the Green Party, which has decided that Lützerath has to be demolished, was have also said that it's their priority to shut down nuclear energy within the next few months. So there were some plants which they were going to continue, and they have allowed to continue for a few months this year. They are now claiming that they're going to be shut down. We'll see what happens. But the option isn't support Ukraine or support Lützerath and the climate. It's how can we find a good solution for allowing both of these things, because Germany has commitments to more than just Ukraine. It also has commitments to the climate legislation, which passed in the Bundestag unanimously.
Okay, let me put this to Rio. Now, Rio, I understand the initiative that you are working for is advocating against the expansion of this coal mine, but are you really providing an alternative solution to the German government? What can they do at this point?
Yeah, actually, there is an alternative solution, but it doesn't come from us. It comes from hundreds of scientists that gave already solutions to the government, and they gave it over the past years over and over again. Last year, there was an initiative, German Zero, that worked out with different actors of economics, of politics, of scientists, a plan how can we get 1.5 degree conform. And right now, also, like I already said, they showed a study where they showed how without with having the sanctions against Russia, at the same time they can stop burning coal that is under Lützerath. And there are the solutions, but they are not heard by the government, because the government their aim is right now not to find the perfect solution, but they are just providing RWE's interest. And RWE's interests are, of course, to burn the coal, that they can continue to make profit with that. And RWE.
Okay, I get your point. Now, you mentioned RWE a couple of times there. I want to put this to Volker. So, Volker, the German government's aim at this point is not to solve the energy crisis, but to make more profit for the energy giant RWE. That's what Rio thinks.
Yes, I heard Rio. And I understand his anger. I mean, what we're seeing is that the Green Party is ripped apart almost between those who insist that the previous energy policy exiting traditional energies has to continue, and those who say that now we have a different priority. I would insist, however, that it's not about money, because what does the government earn if RWE, instead of until 2038, terminates in 2030, but in the meantime mines and uses somewhat more coal? The differences are really quite minor. The point is that you had people in the government of North Rhine-Westphalia who came from the Green Party, who have been activists in favor of exiting traditional energies, who now felt compelled, because of the reasons that we talked about, the war, to find another kind of compromise, which they reached in October of last year. So it is ripping apart the Green Party.
Okay. James, now, in one of your earlier responses, you had mentioned the Paris Climate Agreement. Correct me if I'm wrong. The expansion of this coal mine is a direct violation of the Paris Climate Agreement. So what should be the price here for Germany?
So it's not really possible to say, some activists have said it, but I don't think it's really fair to say that it's a direct contradiction of the Paris Climate Agreement. But it is going to be very hard to keep within Paris Climate Agreement if Germany continues to burn lignite coal. There's hundreds of thousands of tons of it underneath Lützerath. This was also a compromise, remember, between just destroying Lützerath or then destroying 5 other villages. So no one's really happy with this. That's politics. That's coalition politics in Germany in particular. Everyone's expected to make compromises. But I think in this case, this is partly about politics. This is more about politics than about the climate. It's more about the Greens showing that they are ready for government, because they could have, if you own why do you have to destroy Lützerath if you can save the other 4 villages that were in the area? Of course, it's not just about the Ukraine war, because a few years ago there was the Hambacher forest, which was nearby, also destroyed by RWE, and there was a similar campaign of activists to save it. That was set up by the Conservative and Green government locally. So it's not quite fair to say that it's all about the war, destroying these places for lignite coal, because it has been going on longer than that. In my opinion, they could keep nuclear going for longer, which is a much cleaner source of energy. But many people in the Green Party, particularly in Germany, don't want to admit that, because many of them came to politics, and it was in fact one of the founding principles of the Green Party was getting rid of nuclear, because they were scared about Chernobyl or Fukushima. So actually, modern nuclear energy is a lot safer than during Chernobyl or Fukushima. Remember, at Fukushima, the modern reactor was completely untouched. And there's also a lot of misinformation in Germany about nuclear energy. So just a few days ago, the principal news show, the Tagesschau, said that 145,000 people died from the Fukushima reaction. That's not true at all. They died in the tsunami, and they didn't even publish a correction. So I think Germany needs to get over its sort of naturalistic, homeopathic approach to nuclear power, admit that this is a great bridging fuel while investing in renewables, because renewables are getting cheaper every year. The more you invest in them, the cheaper they get, and I think they've actually exceeded expectations. And we can also look at how can we reduce energy usage. So I don't just want to be blaming the Greens here. The Liberal FDP party, who are very pro-car, Germany, of course, has a massive and quite powerful car industry, as we saw in the Volkswagen emissions scandal. The FDP, Free Democrats, have refused to bring in a tempo limit or a speed limit on the Autobahn. So that actually is seen as quite a small issue in Germany, because the media likes to portray it as kind of green activists versus car lovers. But if you look at the actual emissions from the tempo limit, from the speed limit, the emission savings that would bring, that's the annual emissions of a country like Chad, a large country like Chad in Africa. So there are many places that Germany could make savings. There are places that they could introduce and invest in renewables or even liquid natural gas and keep nuclear going.
Fascinating insights into the topic. Yeah, sure. Volker, you want to respond? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to ask Rio about nuclear, because that is an important point that James just made. Indeed, the Green Party was created because of the anti-nuclear struggle. And that is a deeply rooted tradition. And still they had to agree to continue working these last 2 nuclear power stations for another 4 months and in the beginning of this year. That was a pretty tough compromise too. But James has now made a proposal how a compromise could look like. And I wonder how someone who is very active in the Lützerath Lebt movement thinks about that proposal.
Okay. Ria, would you like to respond?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I would like to say that the policy we have right now, it's not a compromise. It's a breaking of the Paris Agreement, and actually they're putting it like a compromise, because now it's not like 2038, but like 2030. But actually, burning coal would have been not economically worth it anymore after 2030. So the amount of coal that is burned is the same, but it's burned faster in times where the RWE can sell it for our prices. And yeah, the nuclear discussion is very interesting. Nuclear energy is still not green or not a clean energy. And right now, many people in Germany are making a conflict that is actually not there, because we have the possibility to save energies, but not to save energy and the people who just want to have a warm flat, but to save energy for the people who are having 3 private jets and who are like the 1 to 10% in Germany who are actually responsible for over the half of emissions of Germany. So we have many spaces where we can reduce the usage of energy without the society going down. And you're missing that point. And this is also like one special thing about capitalism, that because of this massive, because of how resources, like who has how much resources.
All right. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Rio Goldmann, Volker Stanzel, and James Jackson. Thank you very much for talking to us today here on The Newsmakers, and thank you for watching. You can follow us on Twitter and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Jafar Hasnan. See you next time.